Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Carla Chiquen, and I am the Executive Director of CasaCuba at FIU. I would like to thank you for joining us today for the launch of Contemporary, a new series of virtual conversations that highlight the influence of Cuban arts presented by FIU, Miami Beach Urban Studios, and CasaCuba. Before we begin, I would like to tell you about CasaCuba, a very special project of FIU. CasaCuba is bringing together scholars, policymakers, business leaders, students, and the community at large to build a leading cultural center and think tank for the discussion and study of Cuban affairs and the celebration of the Cuban heritage. CasaCuba has attracted influential board members, secured a prominent site on the FIU campus for its state-of-the-art facility, and received significant philanthropic support, including prestigious grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Knight Foundation. Our future venue will feature galleries for interactive exhibits, classrooms to teach FIU's more than 70 courses on Cuba, and a venue for events, artistic performances, and dynamic programs, such as the Contemporary series we are launching today. Contemporary is just a taste of what you will experience at CasaCuba. This initiative is envisioned as a series of intimate conversations featuring leading Cuban voices from the art industry, including artists, gallerists, curators, and other visionaries. The conversations will be recorded and preserved for posterity as part of CasaCuba's oral history collection and will inspire us to reflect on the profound intersections between art and the Cuban identity. We are truly privileged to be joined by David Castillo as the inaugural guest of the Contemporary series. Thank you, David. I also would like to thank FIU alumna and independent curator Danielle Damas for moderating the series, and thank our friends at the Miami Beach Urban Studios and our CasaCuba team for all the hard work behind the scenes to coordinate the program. Thank you all as well for joining us. I hope to see you at future events, and I encourage you to get involved in the historic effort to build our CasaCuba. There are many ways to support the project and become a founder, and we need your help to make this dream a reality. Now I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Colette Mayo. Thank you all very much and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I feel tremendously lucky to be part of the CasaCuba inaugural contemporary art conversation today between Danielle Damas and David Castillo. I'm Colette Mello, and I'm a curator and special events manager here at FIU Miami Beach Urban Studios, known as MBUS. We are an incubator for communication, architecture, and the arts. We have 4 art galleries here and a 3D printing innovation lab with 3 classrooms that are dedicated to architecture and art classes. We're located on Miami Beach on the corner of Lincoln Road and Washington Avenue. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Miami Beach Department of Tourism and Office of Cultural Affairs for their support of these cultural activities. Now I would like to introduce Danielle Damas, my friend, colleague, and fellow graduate of the FIU MFA Visual Arts Curatorial Practice Program. Throughout our academic career together, I got to know Danielle and had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate with her on multiple exhibitions and curatorial projects. I've always been impressed with Danielle's creative production, her advocacy for the arts, and her critical thinking talents. Danielle Damas is a Miami-based curator, cultural producer, creative consultant, and fine arts writer. She is a graduate of the MFA Curatorial Practice degree at Florida International University. She has curated numerous exhibitions throughout South Florida, including here at MBUS, where she curated the exhibition In My Mind's Eye that featured 3 artists whose works examined how memory influences social and personal identities. In addition, she's also curated group exhibitions and solo exhibitions at the David Castillo Gallery and the Bakehouse Art Complex. Her curatorial writings have been featured in the Miami Rail, in Spicio, and Lux Interiors and in Design Magazine. Please join me in welcoming Danielle. Danielle, thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to your conversation with David Castillo.
Thank you so much, Maria Carla, Colette, FIU Miami Beach Urban Studios, and CasaCuba for your wonderful introductions. I'm so happy to be participating in this inaugural series, and I'm even more excited to be launching the event with my mentor and friend, David Castillo. I've known David for about 6 years now. We started working together in 2014, which was the first year the gallery had moved to the Albert Anise building on Miami Beach from Wynwood. And coincidentally, it's the same building that Miami Beach Urban Studios is located in. And over the years, I personally witnessed David nurture and cultivate so many artist careers to reach high acclaim both nationally and internationally. The gallery provides an important platform for artists once excluded from the history of art and history more generally, and who are now defining the aesthetics and critical ideas of our time. David has successfully placed the work of his artists in institutions like MoMA, the Guggenheim, the Perez Art Museum, the Getty, the High Museum, the Vast Museum, and the list goes on and on. This only reinforces the mission of the gallery to advance conversations on overlooked histories and provide a space for inclusion. So I welcome you, David. Thank you so much for participating.
Of course, my pleasure.
Especially on this rainy Tuesday.
I'm happy to be here.
So I guess we could start off the conversation just, I guess, explaining to our viewers that don't know your background, maybe what, began your journey in the art world? What were your main interests and focuses at the start?
Well, I was always interested in art as a kid. I never really saw art as a profession. It was something that I enjoyed. So my earliest memories of art are in Miami, where I grew up. I remember going to the Gusman, which is now the Olympia Theater in downtown Miami, to see exhibitions of black and white photography. I remember going to shows at the Center for the Fine Arts, which later would become the Miami Art Museum, and which is today the Paris Art Museum. So I always had an interest in art, but I actually started in pre-med at Yale, and I took my first history and art history classes my freshman year. So by the beginning of my sophomore year, I was pretty much set that was my passion. I still at that time didn't know, obviously, that I would find my voice as a curator and a gallerist. But while I was still an undergrad, I did research on secondary market works of a family's collection that had important Latin American artists, Roberto Mata, Wilfredo Lam, Torres Garcia. And so that kind of began the journey organically. So I started out actually doing research on a collection of modern Latin American art. So that's what started me professionally. And then from there, I got a job in the American Decorative Arts department at the Yale University Art Gallery. And then I was an early registrar at, well, the first registrar at Miami, at Miami Art Museum, and when it became a collecting institution. And then I segued from that to going back into secondary market dealing of major works of art. And then 15 years ago, opened the gallery to show primary work by artists whose careers I've been cultivating since then.
And what made you plant roots in Miami specifically when you came from Yale? Did you always envision coming back to Miami, or?
Well, I'm from Miami, so that was important to me, that if I was going to do anything that I was passionate about, I wanted that to be a part of the place that I was from. So that was more a personal decision. Certainly when I got to the point of opening the gallery, everybody said, oh, you should open in New York, you should open in LA, you should open here. Everybody had great suggestions, but I think when you have a particular passion for something, you should pursue it. And for me, it was an important passion to be here in Miami, where my family created roots after leaving Cuba for Spain and then Spain to Miami. So the city, which is a younger city, is very much a part of my personal history and narrative. And so it was important for me to engage what I was doing professionally with this particular city. Even though, you know, people had a lot of suggestions where the gallery could be, it was important for me personally to be here.
And have you ever considered expanding, like going to other cities?
Yes, that's definitely a consideration, and that's always on the horizon. Not other cities in the United States, but it's definitely on the horizon for other cities internationally.
That's very nice. That's very cool. I guess speaking of your background in Miami and being of Cuban descent, you represent a handful of Cuban artists, including Alexis Novoa, Maria de los Angeles Rodriguez Jimenez, Jillian Mayer, and the estate of Belkis Sayun Manso. What was it about each of their practices that caused you to partner together? And how did you see these artists fitting with the overall vision of the gallery?
Well, like all the artists of the gallery, they have personal investigations that, to a certain extent, with those artists you mentioned specifically, mines some element of being Cuban, but also mines other important elements from the history of art and other investigations beyond the personal. So I've always been drawn to artists who are capable of mining and gathering information to make work that somehow is personal and universal at the same time. So I think all of the artists you mentioned definitely fit that paradigm, which is the overall paradigm of the gallery.
And how did you reach that paradigm?
Again, the same way that I decided to plant professional roots in Miami, that conversation of those investigations are personal to me because I personally have thought and written a lot about these ideas over the years. And so when I arrived at Yale, I was in a very welcoming, open environment and was one of the greatest opportunities for critical thinking of my lifetime. And interestingly, I received a letter my freshman year that was addressed to many other students who are considered minorities. And the letter started off, "Dear person of color." And I wasn't quite sure what that meant. So it launched a very lifelong pattern of thinking critically about this idea of who decides who the other is and what the other is. And so it's a narrative that is both personal to me and is also intellectually exciting because it has a lot of permutations and engages with a lot of different people and cultures, not just in the United States, but all over the world.
I might be butchering the quote, but I remember from your New York Times piece in 2018, when you reference this story of receiving this letter, "Dear person of color," you know, I can't help but tie the two ideas of that letter and Miami together because of what you said about, you know, growing up here, people were just always people.
Yeah, I definitely had, I mean, that was my upbringing in my family. I can definitely, you know, speak to that personally, that I never thought of myself in those terms until I left Miami. So for whatever that means, it's definitely a place where I felt a part of the fabric of the larger community. And also, I wasn't thinking in those terms growing up in Miami as far as people being the other or who was different or who was similar. I felt like growing up, I definitely was privileged enough to be in an environment where there was a more inclusive vision of what it was to simply be a person in society that had things to contribute, and not these categorizations that appeared to be so significant to other sectors of society and other places.
Right. How do you bring your own identity into the narrative of the gallery, where you bring a platform to all of these artists? How does your own identity get reflected inside of the gallery?
Well, again, these investigations of who gets considered the other and who writes about the other, and how each of these artists is writing history right now. And in a way, I am giving them that platform and writing it alongside them to kind of work with these narratives that were traditionally overlooked or omitted with intention, to have a platform where historically these artists who are great artists and making objects that are beautiful and significant also have these other narratives that are about adding to the canon that for so long did not include particular points of view. And so you can't have a complete view of human history unless you include all these voices. Otherwise, you have a very particular, singular view of humanity that is not accurate and doesn't paint an intellectually complete picture of the world.
Is there like a specific triumph you feel of like maybe a particular placement of an artwork, or maybe one particular story that you have that felt like you triumphed over a lot of discourse in order to have one of your artist's voices heard? Or is it kind of this gift that keeps on giving kind of aspect, like everyone has such a special and specific voice that each placement or each platform really, becomes part of the framework?
Yes, I wouldn't say that there's a particular placement or story. I think major museums certainly have turned their attention to these conversations, and it's important for that attention to continue long-term and create some kind of historical development, and not just be a conversation about this moment. A lot of people refer to this as kind of a moment or what's going on now, but actually this is a conversation that involves hundreds and thousands of years of history. So there isn't a particular moment, but certainly it was wonderful to have the Guggenheim and MoMA and the MCA Chicago and many other prestigious institutions acquire multiple works by the artists of the gallery. And also just to see over the last year, in 2019, for example, the artists of the gallery were in over 100 museum exhibitions, which is, I would say that's an important feat, where you see kind of the vision of something coming together. For 16 artists, that's a pretty large number of museum shows all over the world. And so I think that kind of cemented what I began 15 years ago with the gallery to the present. And so the idea is obviously that carries forward into history, with these particular great artists being recorded as significant contributors to ideas and to objects.
And do you see that your program has evolved dramatically throughout the years, or do you feel like it's kind of stayed on the same path? Yes.
I think it most definitely has stayed on the same path. Obviously, the artists, their work, and I have evolved as, you know, you would hope all people and things grow and evolve and have new ideas, different visions, different interpretations, and even changes in the way you think about certain things. But certainly the original premise and the original attraction to the type of artists I showed and the type of work that appeals to me aesthetically has remained the same from the very beginning to the present.
I have a question here from Aaliyah Almeida. She wants to know, who are some local Miami artists who have been othered here in Miami that you were able to showcase because of your outside of Miami othered background? What draws you to them as a Cuban gallerist?
Artists who were othered in Miami?
I guess artists that are considered the other in Miami?
That's kind of a hard question to answer because I don't know what other people in Miami consider. I don't show artists because they've been othered. I show the artists because their work is somehow significant or adds a new conversation. But I have shown many artists who over the years were emerging, unknown, overlooked. The vast majority of local artists I showed were emerging or didn't have galleries. And there would be hundreds because at one point we used to do a summer exhibition and each of those shows used to have 60 local artists in them. So locally speaking, there would be hundreds of artists that I think fit the person's question.
Okay. I also have another question here by Maria Carla. She's asking, are there any trends you perceive among emerging Cuban visual artists? What are some of their distinctive characteristics and challenges? Is there an other within this group?
I think with any group of artists that there's not a singular vision. And so it would be unfair to say that contemporary Cuban artists have a particular vision that is somehow Cuban or other. I think Cuban artists who are great artists run the gamut. So you have everything from abstraction to figuration, and there's no particular trend, obviously. You know, it runs everything: painting, drawing, sculpture, installation, video, performance, conceptual sculpture. If you really are interested in art, you definitely will find among Cuban artists a wide range of conversations and interests. So I don't think there's one particular direction or trend.
I think that's fair to say because, you know, even looking at Cuban artists, you know, you have some that come from, let's say, they're half Cuban, half Argentinian. There's a lot of people that it just expands, you know, from their own experiences, their culture, where they live now, what really, you know, draws them to a particular practice. It's just expansive. One other question I have, what would you consider to be next steps for the art world? Do you see it changing given the current circumstances, or do you see it, you know, kind of staying the same?
Well, the art world, sort of as we know it, has been in one way or another in this way since the 1700s. So one pandemic is not going to alter something that kind of has been built up for hundreds of years at this point. So it's kind of something that has already happened before in during the time that the art world has kind of been structured in the way it's been structured now. So it's not that long ago. I mean, it is and it isn't that there was a pandemic or, you know, economic difficulties or whatever example you want to cite. Those things have happened before and have happened under the structure of the art world as we know it now. So this idea that suddenly art is going to become online is, in my opinion, a total fallacy. And obviously, the internet is a great resource for people to do research, to experience art, and to have conversations about art. But nothing can ever replace the experience of seeing art in person, because that's one of the unique characteristics of art. And even a photograph, which is a flat image, you can see it on a screen, but you can't really appreciate the scale unless you're in front of it. You know, you might know what 60 by 70 inches looks like, but you don't know what it feels like because you don't have 60 by 70 inches on the screen. So the only way to approach that experience is in person. So whatever the new normal becomes, whatever shifts there need to be in society, if people need to wear masks moving forward or other viruses after this one, that's separate from the fact that art, first and foremost, is best experienced in person. Looking at something on a screen, number one, is exhausting, and number two, doesn't have the same level of impact as seeing something in person. You know, there are works that I studied throughout my years in college and doing research that I always enjoyed. And then when I went and saw those works in person, wherever in the world, it was just a totally different experience. It not comparable at all to the experience of basically, sorry, that's my alarm. But yes, you need to experience art in person is basically the answer to your question. And so those things help, you know, online experiences, online research, even seeing art that maybe you don't have physical access to, but that should be kind of a motivator for people to go and experience art in person.
I mean, I think it's you said it beautifully that you might know the size, like, in, you know, spatially in your mind, but you don't know what it feels like when you're in front of it.
Yes.
And, I can totally relate to what you said about, you know, seeing something in a textbook and then actually seeing it in person. When I saw Las Meninas for the first time, I had no idea it was so huge.
Right.
Like how engulfing it would feel.
Definitely.
So it is true. I mean, what would you say though? I mean, do you think that it's helpful though to have these resources now, because there's some people that maybe live in a different place that would never be able to travel to these areas, and then they have these resources? Or
Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously, any resource is a great resource. I mean, the use of online information was just beginning to become in use when I was in college. So there were still card catalogs and databases, which would now be called Google. But there were different computers you could use and different databases to access different libraries. So that's always going to be an asset for the general public as well as for scholars and curators. It kind of facilitates research and seeing things. But even with exhibitions that are curated by international curators, you will find that they may have done a lot of research online, obviously for practical reasons, but they've still either seen the artist's work at some point or plan to. So that's still part of the equation for experiencing art, and that's not replaceable.
mm-hmm. I have a question here from Zachary Balber. It says, what is it like to work so personally with great artists, theologians like Sanford Biggers, Lyle Ashton Harris, Xaviera Simmons? More to the point, how have these artists changed your life and your view on the world?
Well, those artists and I share a point of view. So it wasn't so much a change of my point of view at all, but rather a synergy of how we think about certain ideas about the world. And I think that it's been a great growth process with all of us. And it's also been an experience of friendship and camaraderie and open communication that is synergistic. So it kind of goes both ways.
I remember when I had first joined the gallery, you had mentioned that, well, a lot of people ask you, how do you choose your artists? And I remember you saying that you have to get along with them, you know, like, and I've experienced from working with you for many years, the friendships you really develop with all of your artists. Like it really is a shared experience and a shared vision.
Definitely, and that's part of the journey of any gallerist who builds a serious program, is you have very personal relationships with those artists. And so sometimes a call may not even be about art at all. You know, it's about other life conversations that always are impacted or related to their art making, but it's more just a personal narrative between us.
I have a question from an anonymous viewer. They asked, what do you feel is special about being Cuban?
Well, I don't think there's any one way to answer that, because I think that's a very universal question that can be applied to anybody of any background. I'm sure there's something special about everyone. I can speak for my own personal upbringing, where as the son of immigrants, we were inculcated with this idea of studying and being driven and focused. And I don't think that that's particular to Cuban immigrants. I'm sure that that's true of many other people. But that's something that certainly I have seen over the years. You know, a lot of my childhood friends, you know, took up all kinds of professional careers and went to graduate school and everything. So it was definitely an important part of the Cuban psychology to learn things and grow into things and make some kind of contribution, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I can agree with that statement. I also think something very special about being Cuban is getting a cafecito from someone almost at any moment in the day.
As you know, I don't drink caffeine, so I can't relate to that.
But you have decaf cappuccinos.
I do, yes. And I did drink, obviously, coffee growing up, and even when I was young, I would have café con leche. So,
oh, the best. Someone is asking also, is that an original artwork behind you?
It's not original, but it has an original source. It was originally made by Gucci, the fashion house, for Princess Grace of Monaco. It was made as a scarf for her. And now, many years later, Gucci has redone it as a wallpaper, which is what you see in my breakfast nook. So this is where I have breakfast every day.
So amazing, so fabulous. I also would like to personally congratulate you on the exciting news that was announced early this morning by the art newspaper, that you will be planting a new home for the gallery in the heart of the design district this September. Specifically, the Mellon Building,
Yeah.
where there have been pop-up shows by Periton, White Cube, and where Craig Robbins had his own collection on view. What do you see happening next for the gallery as you take this new leap?
Definitely a continuation of the trajectory that we've already begun. So if you look carefully at the upcoming shows, they reflect the entire vision of the gallery, and they reflect what has been built up to this point. So the 123rd exhibition, which will be the show that opens this September, will be by Lau Ashton Harris, who is an artist I've worked with for a number of years, who will also actually inaugurate a solo show at the ICA Miami concurrent with his show at the gallery. So there's a lot of exciting things going on in that new space, and that will be followed by the next and highly anticipated solo show by Von Span. And then fingers crossed, if things are more resolved by then, you know, Art Basel, our booth there, and all the projects that come after that. So it's kind of a continuation of what we've been doing for 15 years, and kind of that growth and development that we were talking about before. So that space gives us a bigger physical footprint to do multiple shows at once, to do different exhibitions concurrent with a solo show of a gallery artist. So it should be very exciting.
Well, I also read that you plan to incorporate some more programming for performance and new media.
Yes.
Which is exciting.
Yes.
Do you envision a more experimental future, or are you going to be?
I've always shown new media. Some artists devote their practice entirely to it, such as Kate Gilmore. Some artists incorporate it as an element of their work, such as Sanford Biggers, Xavier Simmons. So it's definitely always been part of the language of the gallery. But now with the space, there's opportunity for those projects to come to life concurrent with other shows that perhaps are not about that specifically.
It might be a little far ahead, but do you see yourself having like a soft opening? Maybe, I mean, I know it's September, so who knows what.
Right, so that'll be, depends what the state of the state is, right? So we will definitely have a show on view. If that entails people coming in with masks or in small groups, that's fine. You know, we will move forward with our program, you know, that has been pushed forward all these months because people weren't really going anywhere out of health and safety issues. And so we will have the show up, and it'll be in real life. If we're at a point in September where people can actually go into a gallery and congregate for an opening, that would be wonderful. If not, we will still proceed with the exhibition, with the promotion of the artist's work to institutions and to collectors, which is a big part of what the gallerist does. And that's not in any way halted or stopped by the current situation. So that's kind of, the conversation keeps moving forward. But hopefully people will be able to come to some kind of nice opening, you know, to inaugurate the new space and Lyle's important work.
Have you had to make any shifts like during this summer, or?
I mean, the only shift has been that I didn't take a break. So since I've been working, actually,
I don't think that was a shift. I think that's pretty on point with how you function.
So that's, well, I mean, you'd like take a little break or something in the summer, but I haven't done so for obvious reasons this year. And so it's actually been a very productive, successful summer because I've spent all of my time working. So So that would be the only shift, is that I didn't really like find time to rest or go somewhere.
Mhm. I have a question going back to the online technology that's being available right now. Although we cannot see these works in person at the moment, how are galleries helping us see them in new ways through technology? Do you recommend specific museums with successful online exhibitions?
I definitely think the major encyclopedic museums in the United States and all over the world have very sophisticated online platforms where you can see works from the collection, you can see current exhibitions. So definitely the major museums such as MoMA or the Met, you have a wealth of resources online. And I know that local institutions have done online programming, they've done Zoom talks similar to this. And so they've kind of added to their online presence to continue engaging the public about works of art and ideas associated with said works of art.
Mhm. I also know that a lot of local institutions have been doing virtual reality, like the Frost has some amazing exhibitions up right now, the Bass. Yeah, a lot of people are.
And I think one thing we'll see moving forward is more collection shows,
Yeah.
not only with the institutions that are local, but also all over the world. And I think that has a silver lining. You know, people always say, oh, they want to see like the special exhibits, which are all good and well. But I think the permanent collection shows also give you a sense of place and the history of the institution that you're visiting, whether it's online or in real life. So I think we're in a point where we can be excited to see maybe works of art that these institutions care for and own that haven't been on public view for a long time and possibly haven't been on view ever.
Yeah. I have a question here from Maite. How can we integrate art in our everyday life like David did so nicely in his breakfast nook?
I mean, it's very easy to engage with art. Really, it's all around us. If you look carefully enough, you will find the creative ideas of different people all around us, even in a young city like Miami. And so there are ways you can support a young artist. There are nonprofits that do fundraisers, that do special editions with young artists who are unknown. I mean, you could literally buy a work of fine art for $100. So if that's in your budget to spend $100, you know, that you would spend on something else, you could definitely buy works of art and support great causes. I mean, certainly now, a lot of artists have put their artwork to the service of social justice issues, and you could buy a special edition or a one-time work of art, a project by numerous artists. So they're very like inexpensive ways to support art and live with art if that's something, you know, somebody wanted to do. There are also, as far as new media goes, you know, you could even on YouTube pull up videos by artists who have major careers, and you could experience that work in your home. I mean, you literally could play those videos on your television, on your computer. So there's just a lot of unique ways where you can engage with art and even live with it if that's something somebody wanted to do. But
Are there artists of the gallery that have been participating in these kinds of fundraisers throughout COVID, or?
The artists of the gallery have always participated in fundraisers and different issues important to the narrative of their work and to larger conversations in society. But there's nothing for $100. So by an artist at the gallery. So I will say that. But yes, they do contribute. Obviously they can't contribute to everything now as they're artists that are more known. It's impractical that you could obviously support every single cause that you believe in. So it becomes a matter of, picking and choosing at this point for those artists.
I have another question here. Who are some emerging artists we should look out for, emerging Cuban artists? And for sure, one comes to mind of the galleries, which is Maria, who,
Yes.
who recently received a huge award.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to expand on her.
Well, she won a few awards, but one is the Rockefeller Brothers Fellowship. And you're probably thinking of which exactly. That's another award she won recently as a Fulbright to go to Brazil and study the relationship of candomblé with Afro-Cuban traditions. And these are narratives that obviously are a big part of her work and her experience as a person. So it's wonderful that very early on, because she just graduated from Yale, that she's having these opportunities and this kind of support system to develop her practice further and to do kind of in-depth research. So she's definitely a younger artist who is Cuban born, Miami raised, Yale educated. So there's a lot of different angles there. But again, there are so many emerging artists who don't have a gallery or who are working in their studio without, the proper professional support. So there are a lot of unique opportunities for people to kind of go out there and meet those artists during open studios. Obviously, Miami has Ulite and Bakehouse and a lot of different places that have a congregation of studio spaces. And so in those spaces, obviously there are Cuban artists and Cuban American artists. And so it's just a matter of visiting and exploring what's already here, what's already part of our landscape.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, because there's so many artists, from Ulite to Bakehouse, all of these really great residencies here in Miami that are fostering good artists. And I believe earlier you were mentioning like you could buy, great artwork, fine artwork for $100 in like some of these fundraisers. And there's a lot of local things going on right now too.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Yeah. I mean, Locust always does a good fundraiser. I don't know the price point, but I know it's reasonable, to get an original work of art by an artist that you may be interested in or want to support.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the Florida Project. That was one that I saw online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then here we have another question. And you've answered this often, but this is a great question, always helpful. What would you recommend young first-time collectors look for when beginning a collection?
I mean, people have to be passionate about what they buy and should not really look at art as an investment. To me, that's never been the point of collecting art. Obviously, if artwork you buy by artists you love and enjoy appreciates, sure, that's an added bonus. Why not? But people have to really look a lot. They have to go to museums, they have to go to galleries, they have to kind of experience again works in person to kind of figure out what they like, because you might like something on first glance, but then it was an element of what you saw that you liked and not really the thing in its totality. And the more you look, the more you'll realize what is the totality that you like in an object or a painting. And so that's the most important thing to do, is to look when you're starting to collect or starting to explore the possibility of collecting. And so you build relationships with curators, with gallerists, with the artists themselves by going out and looking.
Yeah, and looking could even include what you mentioned earlier, going on YouTube, looking over these art interviews online, or maybe going into the artist's website, asking questions, doing really in-depth studio visits. It takes a lot of research because, like you said, you live with it and it becomes a part of your life. So you really should enjoy it while you experience it. It's not so much just an object. It becomes something. I have another question asking, what was the last piece of art, or what was the last artist that you added to your personal collection?
The last artist I added to my personal collection, that's a good question. It would have been a minute, because a lot of my time and resources go obviously to the gallery, to promoting the artists we show. But the last acquisition was probably a work by Shanique Smith. I would say that's the most recent. Yes, that's probably correct.
And Shanique still has a solo show up in New York at the
No, that show has already ended.
Okay.
Yeah, that show came down. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, these were all great questions. Oh, okay. I just have one more. And which one is the most meaningful piece to you?
They're all meaningful to me. And that's why I have them in my home to look at every day. So I think every time I look at any number of works that are in my collection, I have different ideas or different impressions than what I had when I originally saw these works of art. And that's part of the conversation that you, as a collector or arts professional, has with these objects, is that they engage you in thinking critically and in having new ideas on any number of subjects. So it never stays static when you've really connected with a work of art. It helps you to grow and to be critical. So there's definitely not a single work of art, but I think they all bring a level of joy and satisfaction to my environment.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I think you offered a lot of wisdom and experience to everyone listening. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but I'm super grateful and thankful that you joined us today.
No, it was my pleasure. I was happy to do it. And thank you to FIU and to you for inviting me. And I hope people enjoyed.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to email us and we'll go from there. Thank you.